At the field, a man named Yuki had finally finished his work, so the farmer thanked him and offered money for his job. However, he declined, saying he would not accept rewards for good deeds. Those who heard this were visibly surprised, and the old farmer cried, saying Windmill Village would remember him. Soon after, Yuki got a notice that his village reputation rose by 1. This motivated him further, as he was now close to reaching his goal. The game he was in is called Divine Catastrophe, that was launched a week ago, yet it already drew 1 billion players on launch day for its freedom. The game also featured realistic monster encounters, so this made the game the most popular in the world. Moreover, the game's main draw is its many professions, and with his progress, he needed 1 more point to be a Saint Knight, but he also felt regret over missed rewards since reputation was required. Later, he continued on his way, and noticed a man in black weakly coughing. The man saw him approach and stood up to ask for help. Upon hearing this, he eagerly asked if he really needed his help. The man then confirmed it and asked if it was convenient. Yuki quickly agreed with it, and assumed Malt City missions posed little challenge. With that, the old man handed him a ring and asked him to deliver it to the city, but he found it strange because Malt City was so close. Still, the old man insisted he take it. He tossed the ring into the air, forcing Yuki to catch it in a hurry, and as a result, it landed perfectly on his finger. In an instant, a beam of light struck him and ripped his clothes. Then, he found himself dressed in a new robe, with unfamiliar gear on his hands, and a skull insignia on his chest. Confused by this, he examined his appearance, but he was cut off as the system named him a tyrant, which made the old man celebrate. He then quickly opened his interface, where he saw his profession had changed to tyrant with 100 negative reputation. He was stunned by this, as his hard-earned reputation vanished instantly. Suddenly, the old man coughed again to draw his attention. He nudged Yuki, saying they were on the same side now. However, Yuki angrily questioned him for targeting him. He then replied that he had claimed he could handle any mission, but this made Yuki furiously grab his clothes. He then shouted that his effort to earn a reputation for Saint Knight was now wasted. Yet the old man still insisted tyrants outclass Saint Knights. Hearing this, Yuki could not help but feel despair. So the old man assured him he was now a disciple of tyrants and would be respected. At that moment, Yuki suddenly realized something. He remembered his reputation falling to -100, which the old man affirmed. Yuki then heard his freedom was gone and considered deleting his account. However, the old man vowed he wouldn't lose in vain and bestowed a skill. As soon as he received it, the old man vanished into flames. So he angrily stomped the ground and demanded answers, but none came. With no other choice, he moved on and decided to check the tyrant profession, but even the system provided no information about it. So, he believed he was deceived, and went back to the city to seek a new profession. After a while, he finally reached the city. However, he finds the gates tightly shut, and guards patrolling the area. So he wondered if a war or special event was about to begin, as such events often gave players great achievements and reputation. Knowing this, he thought it might be his chance to recover his reputation. So he approached the gate and asked to be let in. Before he could get closer, a guard warned him to stop or they would attack. He then looked around to see if the warning was meant for someone else, but there was no one nearby, and he realized it was directed at him. He then tried to explain he wasn't evil, but his insignia flared against them. So one soldier drew his sword and shouted that a tyrant was coming. The soldiers charged at once, forcing him to flee, and realized he couldn't enter the city. At that moment, the ring on his finger suddenly lit up, and a system prompt appeared asking if he wished to activate a villain's skill. While he wondered what it meant, he accidentally tripped. As a result, he rolled across the ground, and he was soon surrounded by soldiers. With no other choice, he looked at his interface determined to restart later. He finally decided to activate the skill. His ring then immediately ignited with blazing flames. At that moment, a soldier rushed forward to strike him down, so he turned around quickly and drew his sword. When the attack came, he easily dodged it. Then he raised his blade next and countered with a swift strike. With this, he successfully dealt 1,000 damage to the soldier. He was then stunned to see a critical hit, despite being only level 1, but he was soon branded wanted for attacking a guard, so he hurriedly asked the surrounding guards for forgiveness. However, they ignored him and continued their assault. Left with no choice, he fought back while repeatedly apologizing. As the battle continued, he noticed 3 soldiers charging at him with their skills. He was certain he was finished, and braced himself. But when their attacks hit him, he realized it barely hurt and only reduced 5 points of his health. After realizing this, he immediately counterattacked. He cut them down and drained their health while still muttering apologies. Before long, the area echoed with his voice apologizing. Eventually, he was the only one left standing, surrounded by fallen soldiers. At last, he finally had the chance to check his interface again. He then confirmed his power was tied to the villain's skill, fueled by his bad reputation. After learning this, he looks around thinking his luck isn't that bad. Though he escaped jail, He sighed knowing he couldn't return to Malt City, so he decided to head for Chaos City. But he checked the soldiers' gear first, but only found steel. Not long after, the guard leader arrived with reinforcement, but they arrived too late and found bodies and equipment piled aside. One soldier then reported an adventurer was responsible, though he doubted it. Nevertheless, the leader set a bounty of 200 gold on Yuki, but while he vowed their laws would not bend, Yuki casually walked off yawning. After a while, he was notified of a bounty on his head worth 200 gold, so he grumbled that his Saint Knight dream was crushed by this negative reputation, and his only comfort was the villain's skill, lasting a minute with an hour cooldown. Setting that aside, hunger soon overtook him and slowed his steps. Just then, he spotted a villager nearby. He thought the village might have food, so he greeted him. However, the man recognized him as a tyrant and fled in fear. Seeing this, he considered fixing his reputation, but he's uncertain if it could be achieved. Later, when he entered the village, the residents raised weapons, ordering him to stay away. He tried to explain himself, but they all scattered in panic, so he was left all alone. He was then confused how they knew he was a tyrant, until he spotted the insignia on his chest. But his stomach growled again, hence, he decided to find food and something to cover his insignia. He began searching the area, and soon found sausages hanging nearby. Though he hesitated because the villagers were gone, yet he was too hungry to resist and began eating. Before long, he kept stealing food, and his reputation sank lower. After finally satisfying his hunger, he stepped out and noticed a cloak hanging nearby. Thinking it looks pretty good to help conceal his insignia, he took it and found that it fit him well, though doing so lowered his reputation once again. Afterwards, the villagers returned and checked their homes. One of them soon shouted that their sausages were missing, but they found only food and a cloak were taken, so they wondered if they overreacted. A bald man confirmed Yuki as a tyrant for the skull insignia, but another villager found a note. They read Yuki's note saying he was starving and would return, but instead of calming them, it only deepened their fear. At the same time, Yuki suddenly sneezed when they talked badly of him, but he assumed the villagers were speaking of him with gratitude. After reading his note, later, he finally arrived at Chaos City. As he stepped inside, the attention of the surrounding people shifted toward him. He also saw people lying in the streets and wondered if this was truly Chaos City, since forums said Chaos City was a brutal three-way zone, but in person it felt worse. After walking for a while, he spotted a tavern. He recalled that such places were ideal for gathering information and supplies, so he decided to enter the place. After he took a seat, the bartender asked what he wanted. Thus, he ordered 20 milk and 20 long-lasting food portions. The bartender then remarked that this was a pub, not a nursery, which caused the nearby drinkers to burst into laughter. Despite this, Yuki refused to order alcohol, so the bartender warned him that everything there was expensive. Yuki then replied he'd earned 50 silver from monsters. However, the bartender said the order cost 4 gold and doubted Yuki could pay. The adventurers nearby also jeered that only the wealthy could endure Chaos City. When Yuki stood up, they laughed even louder, but they saw him move toward the notice board, so they advised him to leave. Some even warned the missions were deadly and beyond him, yet he ignored them and picked up one of the posters. He presented it to the bartender, and asked where rewards could be claimed once he finished it. The bartender frowned, and asked if he was serious about hunting a Kasky. The moment the name was mentioned, the room fell silent, but it soon erupts into laughter. The bartender then said a Kasky's reward could open a tavern, but warned it was vicious. However, Yuki left saying he would return, so the bartender warned against empty claims. While others spoke of rare Kasky meat, Yuki resolved to claim the reward and clear his bounty. Meanwhile, the bartender figured Yuki would die and bring no earnings, so he slammed the table in frustration, muttering that his order was taken too. With that, he set the poster aside thinking it was a waste. Especially the mission involved a high-level Kasky with a 500 gold prize. Later on his way, Yuki began searching for a nearby pond. He recalled Kaskys lived in such areas, yet the land felt too barren, so he stopped to rest first, and he felt hunger returning again. As he ate some dry food, he remembered the forest to the northwest and decided to go. Later after his meal, he felt satisfied and ready to move on. However, the ground suddenly began to shake. He looked around but saw nothing, so he wondered if it was a quake or a beast. Soon, the tremors grew stronger, so he drew his sword excitedly, thinking his prey had come. But what emerged on the ground was only a small worm. Disappointed by this, he let out a sigh, but in the next instant, the creature rapidly expanded into a massive form. It turned out to be the level 40 Kasky, so he felt lucky and surprised why it came here instead of a pond. Before he could think further, the Kasky opened its mouth. It even tried to lunge at him, so he rushed forward to counterattack. His blade struck the creature, dealing 830 damage, and he continued without hesitation, dealing the same amount of damage. However, he failed to notice it retaliating, so he was struck by its huge tail, and he was sent rolling across the ground. Lying there, He felt annoyed that the damage dealt seemed so little, but he quickly realized his attributes had increased more than 30 times. Therefore, he concluded that if the fight continued like this, the Kasky would eventually fall before him. The monster let out a piercing screech once again, and Yuki responded with a shout as he charged forward as well. Leaping into the air, he moved above the Kasky and caught it off guard. He then adjusted his position midair, and he turned toward it to finally end it. With immense power, he drove his sword down deeply into its head, so the Kasky then let out an earful cry from the pain. Soon after, the system notified him his Kasky hunt was complete. Taking advantage of the corpse lying there, he took its epic horn and rare scale, knowing the reward was great. Unfortunately, the equipment needed level 25, but he was only level 13 earlier, so he felt satisfied since defeating the elite monster gave him many levels. And for once, he saw Tyrant valuable, but he longed to change class to not be hunted. Moving on, he turned to the corpse and decided to put all points into strength to take it. Afterward, he tried to drag the corpse with all his might, but the Kasky was far too large to move, so he exhaustedly slumped to the ground thinking someone might steal it if left behind. Yet he had no choice but to return first and hand in the task. Later at the tavern, he confidently declared that he had killed the Kasky. The room fell silent for a moment after hearing this, but some adventurers began to doubt his claim, thinking he's just bragging. On the other side, a drunkard recalled him as the kid who claimed the mission yesterday. The store was soon filled with laughter after hearing this. The drunkard then approached, mocking him for daring to return. He even claimed Yuki only fooled around and returned to save face. With that, the drunkard said his claim only made him look silly, but while he laughed, Yuki simply asked the bartender if he could claim his reward. This angered the drunkard and asked if Yuki thought anyone believed him. The bartender then stepped in, telling Henry he would handle it since it was his bar, so Henry reluctantly returned to his seat. After that, the bartender asked Yuki where the Kasky's body was. He said its meat was famed as the finest, and the mission was to obtain it. Therefore, he made it clear that without the corpse, there would be no reward. Yuki replied the body was outside the city, too heavy for him alone, but he had proof. However, the bartender slammed the table and cut him off. He accuses him of telling such clumsy lies without understanding his situation. Soon, the people whispered, the bartender was Kars, an outlaw with 100 gold bounty, and just as Yuki listened to this, he heard Kars saying he's brave for doing this. He then removed his glasses, saying it had been long since anyone dared mock him, so he chose to show his strength, and demanded who Yuki thought the fool was. Yuki quickly felt the crushing aura, and now understood why all feared him, but he still insisted the Kasky body was outside, and it was up to him to check. As for the reward, he made it clear that it had to be given. Kars was momentarily stunned hearing this. Soon he laughed loudly, asking the crowd if they heard Yuki. He then leapt over the counter, confronting him, and asked if he was being threatened. Without hesitation, he threw a punch, declaring that he was courting death, but Yuki simply smiled and waited. When the punch came, he dodged it with ease, though the impact still surged beyond his frame. Kars then scoffed, claiming that he's just a little fast. So he prepared another strike, and was confident it would land this time. Realizing he wouldn't pay him, Yuki resolved to teach him a lesson. As the punch neared, he calmly said he wouldn't kill him for his golds. The crowd heard this, so they ridiculed him, and shouted for Kars to destroy him. However, just as Kars's fist was about to land, it suddenly stopped midair. He had noticed that Yuki's sword was already pointed at him. Before he could react, a sharp pain spread across his chest. Yet Yuki said he had no intent to kill, only to hospitalize if needed. He even twirls his blade while remarking that Kars would cover the cost. Hearing this, Kars silently acknowledged Yuki's strength, but the crowd taunted him, and asked if he couldn't beat a mere kid. He then shouted at them to stop and steal himself, since he knew the others would turn on him if he showed weakness now. Thus, he attacked again, feinting with his left before striking. But this time, Yuki did not even dodge and the blow landed, yet he remained completely unaffected, so Kars was shocked. He also realized even a fraction of his strength had no effect. Frustrated by this, he gathered more power. He launched another punch with full force. However, Yuki said Kars was strong but unlucky, since his own attributes multiplied many times. Kars still continued and sent shockwaves through the tavern. It even ended up reaching the outside. When the dust settled, the tavern was in disarray. However, the surrounding crowd stared in disbelief at the outcome. They found that Yuki was unscathed by the blow. He even remarked that such attacks could only reduce a small fraction of his health. Kars then scaredly begged him to leave, but he only warned he might kill him by accident. So he raised the sword, deciding to strike with the flat side. The people nearby watched cautiously. Even Henry began to wonder if Yuki's claim about killing the Kasky was true. Soon, painful screams filled the tavern as Kars was beaten. Yuki then wondered what to do if he still refused, since each hit sliced away Kars's life. With that thought, he coldly declared that it might be better to kill him instead. Kars was frightened by this and finally agreed to pay. Hearing that, Yuki accepted since it saved him from dealing with Kasugi's body. After sheathing his sword, he asked for the money, and Kars said he'll give it quickly. Afterwards, he gathered the coins but dropped some on the way, so he had to pick them up by himself. Then he placed them into Yuki's bag. Once done, he asked if it was correct and Yuki replied based on his own count. He stated that the payment was still short by 20 silver coins. This immediately made Kars break into a sweat, and without wasting time, he rushed inside to get the remaining amount. But he only finds his cabinet empty, so he slumped to the ground realizing he had nothing left. Suddenly, Yuki appeared and reminded him of what he had said earlier. However, he couldn't recall it, and he grew more anxious. Yuki then again asked for 20 meals and milk, to which Kars accepted, so he rushed off once more to prepare them. Meanwhile, the adventurers became curious about Yuki's background after he crushed Kars. After a while, Kars returned with the items. Yuki carefully checked each bag and confirmed there were 20 servings of bread and milk. Satisfied by this, he took everything and praised him. With that settled, he finally turned to leave the tavern. So Henry let out a sigh of relief, thinking it was over. But Yuki reappeared, instructing Kars to leave the city and find the body. After saying that, he left for good. Kars now believed Yuki and considered going to confirm. Just then, the tavern door opened again. Everyone was startled when the person mentioned the day's heavy activity, so she wondered why the place had closed so early. Realizing it was Vicky, Henry said she almost scared them. However, she clarified she only came with bounty news of a boy worth 200 gold. While she said she wanted to meet the boy, Kars thought of starting a new shop elsewhere. Meanwhile, Henry asked Vicky what she had said. She repeated she hoped to meet the boy, but he asked about her earlier remark, so she then mentioned a weak-looking boy with a bounty of 200 gold coins. Hearing this, Kars asked if the boy was wearing a black trench coat. She proceeded to show him the profile, and questioned how they knew. Seeing the bounty was double his, he finally understands why he can't beat Yuki, but his expression led her to suspect that he had already met him. She then offered 10% of the bounty if they revealed Yuki's location. Yet Henry refused because Yuki wasn't weak since he easily beat Kars. Upon hearing this, she turned to Kars for confirmation, but he only warned her to mind her words, and her eyes fell on his chest wound. Thinking Yuki might be easy to approach, she proceeded to ask where he went. The adventurers nearby then assumed her end was near due to this. Meanwhile, Yuki wandered through the city, but failed to find a blacksmith. He also needed to visit City Hall to offset his bounty. Yet with only his current skills, he feared arrest, as his villain power lasted too briefly. Realizing he needed preparation, he checked his inventory. He looked at the Kasugi horn and considered its use as a weapon. At that moment, a man near an alley asked what he was looking for, so he replied that he needed a smithy. The man then claimed to be the best blacksmith in the city, but he doubted him due to his appearance, so the man explained he only wore proper attire while working. Upon hearing this, Yuki found it reasonable. Suddenly, the man led him away and asked if he wanted to repair or craft weapons. Yuki grew wary, knowing blacksmiths sell their work first, yet he stayed confident in his skill. So once inside the alley, he stated that he wanted a weapon crafted. The man eagerly asked for materials. Hence, he took out the horn and the man quickly eyed the valuable material. He then promised him to forge the finest weapon in exchange for it. However, Vicky arrived and exposed him as a liar. The man grew enraged by this and asked her to explain herself. She then called him Brian, who's known for fraud and scamming her of the ruby previously. Still, Brian argued it wasn't her concern and accused her of spoiling his goodwill. So she pulled out a paper and was determined not to repeat the past. She then showed Yuki's bounty and warned him he's not to be offended. Brian fled quickly at this, while she reminded him of the info fee. After that, Yuki began asking who she was and why she was helping him. She then introduced herself as an information merchant that traded rare information. She even cited selling intel on the Darum gold heist and Sagos Lord's vanishing. As for helping him, she said his reputation for trouble made him a fitting partner, so she plans to show sincerity first by offering to take him to the best blacksmith. With that being said, she extended her hand and asked his response. Yuki finally agreed yet threatened to cut ties if tricked, and she promised she wouldn't. Later, as they traveled, he asked if the smith was near, and she said Veruga City lay ahead. Setting that aside, she asked if he had really killed the Kasugi. He answered yes and added that it had not been difficult, which made her realize she must earn his trust fast for their partnership to work. Afterwards, she pointed forward and explained the elder smith would use his materials well. However, he doubted he could enter the city, so she said she's prepared. She then led him to a hidden entrance in the sewers of Veruga City. As they entered, she said the smell was bad but it's safer, since the guards avoided such places, even though it was their duty. She also said the sewers ran through the city, which is not ideal but handy. but along the way he saw a child, and sensed the place wasn't peaceful either. Later at the ladder, she warned him to be cautious for guards and not look up. So he shut his eyes, while warning himself against trusting NPCs too easily. Once inside the city, they arrived at a house, and Vicky called out the name Tim. Meanwhile, Yuki found the shop ordinary, and doubted it was the best. Soon the door opened, and a man stepped out asking who they were, so Vicky quickly answered that it was her. Tim then recognized her, and remarked he hadn't expected her growth. After that, she introduced Tim as her father's friend and the finest blacksmith. So Yuki greeted him, though he still harbored doubts. Vicky then explained Yuki's plight, and his need for a forged weapon. Tim agreed to let him stay, but refused to forge since he was retired. Surprised by this, she revealed that they intended to use a Kasky horn as material, which made him ask if it was truly Kasky's horn, and she confirmed it. She also teased that his excuses prove he didn't know how to use it. However, he declared he'd craft not just a weapon but a growth type. Yuki then was surprised by the weapon that could grow. But Tim asked first if he truly believed he could forge top-grade weapons. In response, he took out the horn, and said there was no reason not to. Seeing the high-quality material, Tim could not hide his excitement. He touched it gently, and remembered it had been years. Looking at Yuki, he thanked him for his trust. Then he finally declared that he would begin at once. When the door shut at them, Vicky told Yuki not to be offended, and he agreed. However, he remembered Tim's remark and questioned if he'd worked with it before. She then took his hand, and said he'd asked the right person, but it's too hot inside. Once outside, she said Tim had crafted the legendary Fang of Truth. Yuki was quickly awed hearing this, and admitted he hadn't expected such a past. Just then, Vicky noticed something nearby. She quickly grabbed his shoulder, and turned him around. She also pressed a finger to his lips to silence him. She then reminded him that soldiers were patrolling, and he must stay hidden. While he was fighting for breath, he listened as she said Tim must not be disturbed. After some time, they managed to avoid the guards. Not long after, Tim stepped outside, and thanked them for waiting. He then handed the sword to Yuki, hoping it met his expectations. Yuki immediately confirmed that the horned sword could indeed grow. It also carried 3 special effects, each one exceptional. Suddenly, Tim asked if he was satisfied, so he bowed and thanked him for crafting such a weapon. But Tim merely extended his hand, and said there was no need for thanks. He then stated that the total forging fee was 200 gold coins. Vicky also demanded 20 gold for her info and past help, so Yuki felt led into a trap. Still, he admitted he lacked the gold, but she offered credit. She reminded him of their deal, saying he'd repay through tasks and rewards. Later, as they walked, she spoke of Fort Riel's fair and a Sunwoo elder's assassination job. Yuki, however, questioned why it's all illegal work. She quickly replied that his bounty made legal jobs out of reach. He then insisted he'd repay her fee, and wanted legal work instead of being hunted. So she muttered at the irony of a criminal shunning crime, yet she agreed to his request. She soon found a mercenary job, and he agreed to hear the details. They then spoke of Sagos and Halma raising troops for war against each other. At such a time, strength mattered, and big contributions might erase his bounty. Hearing this, he agreed in hopes to make money and erase his bounty. Later, when they arrived at the city, they noticed many people leaving and realized the situation was serious. As they approached the gate, the guards stopped them. Vicky quickly explained that they were not enemies, but the guard replied that none of their people were stationed outside. She then explained they came as mercenaries for recruitment. With this reason, the guard told them to go to the barracks and apply. Later on the way, she warned Halma's lord was sinister, yet rich, while Sago's righteous but stingy. However, he said integrity meant less risk, so lower pay didn't matter. This made her quickly question if he knew he was a villain, yet his power made it irrelevant. Later inside, Yuki's application was received, but they were told they were not welcome in Sago City. Vicky reacted in surprise, so the man explained that he recognized her as nothing more than a gossip seller from Chaos City. As for Yuki, he saw through his disguise. He accused him of killing Malt guards, yet retorted that their Sago's guards were stronger, so he urged them to leave since his lord had no interest. Vicky scoffed at being rejected. She then asked if they didn't fear they might join Halma instead. The man quickly turned at her words. Then he laughed with the guards, thinking Sagos would win even if they switched. However, he now refused to let them go and ordered the guards to surround them. Vicky quickly admitted she'd overtalked but insisted the fee still applied. Yuki grew annoyed after realizing clearing his bounty wasn't so simple. He then told the man to dismiss the guards, and he'd act as if nothing happened. But he just laughed and said he was blind to the situation. He argued they feared time wasted, so he'd lock them away for good. Yuki drew his sword at that, and said he would be disappointed. The guard who saw this began to sweat nervously. In the next instant, dark aura spread from his blade as he proclaimed their defeat. The man still refused, and ordered the guards to seize him. The moment he spoke, his glasses suddenly shattered. In an instant, Yuki appeared and cut his health to 50,000. The man's neck snapped due to this. As his body hit the ground, Yuki was notified he attacked the Grand Master and was now wanted. The soldiers behind him were then stunned. The Grand Master was dead, so they turned on Yuki to make him pay. They all rushed forward to avenge their Grand Master, yet Yuki remained still and silently activated his villain skill. With one strike, he dropped their health to 20,000. Another notification appeared and confirmed the Seigo's guards were dead. His sword was also strengthened and urged him to kill more. He quickly rejected it and insisted the sword could not control him. Vicky heard this and quickly urged him to flee while he could. However, he refused and insisted escape was meaningless after being belittled. Just then, more soldiers arrived to capture him. Vicky then pressed him to drop his pride, since she couldn't take it any longer. Yuki fell silent for a moment and struck again, where he cut down the guards that threatened her. Seeing this, she called him a lunatic for also endangering her life. He then replied while fighting that it did not matter, as he could be resurrected. But she pressed that she would die for real, and as his partner he couldn't risk her life. He then extended his hand and assured her she would never be arrested or killed. His words quickly softened her expression. However, she clarified she won't pay him or offset his debt. Meanwhile, at the doorway, a man who had seen the massacre tried to escape. However, he froze when someone asked where he was going. He staggered back and was shocked to see Yuki already there. Yuki proceeded to raise his sword toward him. He remarked the Grand Master who annoyed him was already gone. Before he could continue, the man admitted that he already knew. Yuki paused and was confused as to what the man meant. The Castellan then vowed to give up Sagos and bear the consequences. Suddenly, the system crowned Yuki Lord of Sagos, but all NPCs there will disappear. Vicky soon appeared at his side, teasing him as the new city lord. She casually offered to handle the publicity for him, and he refused. Yet she still left, saying he'd be in tomorrow's news, as he reached to stop her. He was then left as Sagos' new lord, and shouted he never desired the job. Later that night in Halma, a servant rushed to tell the lord something had happened. But the lord snapped it must be urgent or he would be fed to dogs. So the servant blurted that Halma might fall if he didn't act. This caught his attention, and he ordered a full explanation. Hence, the servant handed him a document. He then read, it's about Yuki spreading chaos at the powerful military of Sagos. However, his face changed on seeing Yuki had slain the guards and taken Sagos. At once, he thought Yuki's a devil for Halma. So he asked about Yuki's plans, but the servant replied Yuki was still resting. Hearing this, the lord ordered treasures prepared to win Yuki's favor. Meanwhile, at the tavern, Kars heard of Yuki and called him unfathomable. He then wondered if Yuki would come after them, which made the others stop him. Henry was also asked and confirmed Yuki killed the lord after the Grand Master's insult. Listening to this, the entire tavern fell silent. Elsewhere, other players complained leveling was hard, but Yuki easily toppled Sagos, but one of them warned to be careful since a guard nearly slew him for verifying it. Suddenly, a girl said the person's name was Yuki and pressed them to visit Sagos. Meanwhile, Yuki got notices granting him power to set city rules. So he was amazed by the benefits, as city lordship was not his goal. At the same time, the former city lord remained kneeling before him. He believed his end was near, and Yuki only delayed it. However, Yuki asked why he still knelt and told him to go, yet he still refused and believed he's playing tricks on him. Just then, noise erupted outside. Yuki stepped forward to inspect, while the lord braced for death. However, he just passed by him and remarked that players were arriving. From the balcony, he saw a large number of players gathered below. However, they began to leave, thinking it's a wasted trip. Hearing this, Vicky questioned if they weren't afraid of Yuki. However, Yuki asked about her absence, and she said she promoted him for visitor gains. He then said his original plan was to gain money for bounty, yet now his reputation suffered. But she recalled urging him to escape, yet he refused, and now it didn't matter. After all, the adventurers began leaving saying the place was dull. Yuki then prepared himself knowing he must show dominance. Otherwise, he would not earn anything at all. Hearing this, Vicky asked what he planned to do, but she was surprised to see him seriously rushing toward them. The impact of his landing drew everyone's attention. They turned in confusion and some thought an explosion hit, but as the dust cleared, they were shocked to see a person behind it. Yuki rose to his feet and stretched his arms wide. Then he welcomes them to the new Chaos City and declares himself Lord. The girls thought him devilish, yet strikingly handsome. However, some men denied his legendary reputation written in the reports. Hearing their doubts, he asked the person what he thought. The man said he looked weak and relied on tricks to win the city. A girl nearby grew curious of him, but her friend warned he's the prominent Lester from Chaos City. They also discussed he was already level 20 and far ahead of most. Lester then stepped forward, saying Yuki couldn't claim New Chaos City without knowing him. Without hesitation, he rushed forward intending to kill him. As he charged, he imagined himself easily seizing the city lord's seat, yet Yuki stood still and smiled faintly as the blow struck. The force stirred up smoke that quickly filled the surroundings. When the dust was lifted, the others questioned if the fight was over. They then saw Yuki remain standing and defeated the level 20 Lester. As they wondered Yuki's level, Lester lay knocked out with 4 minutes to revive. Suddenly, Yuki admitted the city was ruined, but warned against reckless acts. He said all were free to come, yet violators would pay. But he also assured them Sagos held chances for those who helped it grow. And as a player, he said he'd issue quests and lead team activities like NPCs. So he moved to issue his first quest and wield his authority as Lord. He revealed the ruined city needed cleaning and offered 10 coppers for 3 areas. But he warned it was limited, so the players accepted the task fast. Some even dreamed of becoming lords, while some find this task better than thankless jobs. Not long after, they rushed off to clean and competed to finish first. Yuki saw this and could not help but smile. Vicky soon arrived clapping and praising him for doing well, but he ordered her to drop the flattery, so she reminded him of the arriving guests instead. Yuki then received notice that a delegation was coming from Halma City. Nearby, Halma's aide looked around thinking no one was there. When he spotted Yuki and Vicky, he assumed they were civilians. So he believes the devil wasn't killing on sight, and talks could happen. He then introduced himself as Sura, and said Lord Hedy came to meet Sagos' new ruler. So he asked if they knew where to find him. Vicky smiled knowingly at this. Then she pointed to Yuki and revealed it was him. Sura was shocked and quickly felt grateful he had spoken with care. Realizing the situation, he bowed and asked if Yuki could meet their lord. Yuki glanced ahead and replied that he was free. Hence, Sura said he would inform Hedy first. However, when he returned, Hedy stated that he had already heard everything, so he came forward thinking Yuki is calmer than the reports claimed. Still, he introduced himself politely and offered gifts to honor his new title. Yuki realized reports fueled Hedy's fear and looked at Vicky. Setting that aside, he invited Hedy to the mansion for talks. Later, as they walked, Yuki felt annoyed with the exaggerated reports about him. Meanwhile, Hedy looked around, admitting Sagos was far larger than his own city. However, he spotted adventurers close and called Yuki's attention. He whispered, adventurers were trouble, and allowing them now could harm the city. Sura was taken aback by this, since he's aware Yuki is also an adventurer. He then pulled Hedy aside, and was questioned if it's important. He failed to answer properly, and was warned he'd be fed to dogs. So he whispered that adventurers weren't so bad since Yuki was one. Hedy was then left speechless, and called himself foolish for raising it. Suddenly, Yuki suddenly grabbed him and caused him to panic. He turned and caught Yuki, saying he opposed his statement. He noted that adventurers had cleaned the city despite low pay. Thus, he immediately withdrew his remark that adventurers were chaotic. However, Sura reminded him they'd walked ahead, so Hedy called for Yuki to wait. Later, inside the mansion, their voices echoed with amazement. Hedy even questioned if this was truly the Lord's home, as it's more grandeur than his. Just then, Vicky interrupted saying she needed to speak with Yuki. So he decided to step aside, as he had only come to deliver gifts. Yuki quickly sensed she had a plan and excused himself. After it, he urged her to speak. She explained Sagos had begun to form, but was far from stable. She acknowledged his strength, but stressed city rule needed more than power. So their greatest need now was loyal residents, and aides to handle daily tasks. He quickly agreed and revealed he had an idea. He said many Sagos natives fled as refugees, yet adventurers' arrival made growth easy. But the real issue was the lack of skilled workers. Skilled training also drains resources and makes novice cities uncompetitive, so he told her that he needed her help, which puzzled her. He instructed her to declare Sagos would recruit by ability, with higher pay and full provisions, but she warned such hiring could draw outsiders or shady people. Yuki replied it did not matter, as his duty was protecting Sagos' lives and rights. Moreover, he believed none would dare attack, as he'd faced threats himself. She then acknowledged his strength and admitted it might work. Still, she thought his upright decisiveness was surprising for a wanted man, but she trusted him, so she agreed and he quickly promised to wait. Soon after, Hedy appeared and asked if Yuki was done. Realizing he'd neglected his guest, Yuki apologized, but Hedy waved it off. He then ordered his men to show rare items and added the 500 gold. Yuki's attention was immediately drawn to the items. He saw they boosted attributes and knew they weren't ordinary. Hedy also revealed one final treasure, claiming it was the best in his city. He showed a Balrog fire orb granting 1000 fire resistance. Yuki took it and was surprised they held such value, since compared to others, it was far more useful against future fire monsters. Suddenly, Vicky returned fast and noticed Hedy's spending, which surprised Yuki. She confirmed she was done and proudly claimed to be a top information seller. While she told him one line would spread the news fast, he lifted the treasure. He then handed all of it to her, and this left Hedy confused. He was shocked and wondered if Yuki was still dissatisfied. However, he saw him still holding the fire orb. So he asked if he was pleased, and he said it was good. He also reassured him not to worry, since he had no designs on Halma City. Hetty felt relieved hearing this, and offered future help. With that settled, Yuki urged him to return, and he quickly agreed. Yuki then finally relaxed and felt oddly exhausted despite the gifts. After it, he looked at the gold coins and asked Vicky what he owed. But she tells him that the items he gave surpassed the money. Yuki then treated it as future payment, while she cautioned him about getting scammed. Yet, he insisted he could rely on her and asked for guidance ahead. She was clearly moved by these words, so she took his hand and said she couldn't help it. Unexpectedly, the ground beneath them began to shake. Yuki was then notified a world boss spawned with epic gear as reward, so he chose to check, which led Vicky to ask about it, but he gave no explanation and simply pulled her along. Meanwhile, outside another city, a massive boss appeared. Its enormous body loomed over the surroundings. As it neared the walls, the people ran away, fearing of being killed. The boss then began smashing the walls, and soon broke through, where he proceeds to unleash destruction within the city. People saw this and cried out in despair as their city was torn apart. Quiet City soon fell, and players lost 10 points, which left many furious. But the destruction went on as the boss tore the city apart. From afar, Yuki and Vicky watched in shock as the city fell within minutes. They also found that the boss's details showed nothing but level 100. While Yuki continued looking, Vicky asked about taking measures, and he said to observe first. Thus, she was shocked to see adventurers reviving and rushing back in. However, she figured they are seemingly unconcerned for their lives. At that moment, the leaderboard's number 1 Sam was eager for the epic reward, so he charged at the boss without hesitation. Then he struck it and dealt 1,000 damage. After doing so, he quickly retreated. However, he was shocked that his top damage attack made little impact. A bolt of lightning suddenly appeared and struck toward the boss's direction. The moment it reached its body, it was instantly halted. Soon after, the second-ranked player, Mika, appeared. She raised her sword and unleashed a series of attacks. Sam watched this and saw her damage was minor, so he's reassured he is still highest. Suddenly, players began yelling and insisting they unite to stop Sam from winning solo. In response, a wave of attacks rained down on the boss all at once, yet its health barely moved and remained at 99%. With a single strike, it sent multiple players flying away. Vicky continued to watch everything unfold, but the boss's gaze shifted toward her, so she immediately grew uneasy and asked if it was coming their way. Yuki calmly told her to lead the people to safety, but she asked about him. In response, he confidently said that he would kill it. Meanwhile, the plaza erupted in fear as players rushed to leave to reset Resurrection, but Vicky stepped in, calming them as she led them toward escape. She also assured them their city lord would buy time for evacuation. Hearing this, the players looked ahead and spotted a lone figure outside. They realized it was Yuki, and that he intended to face the flame giant alone. As he ran, players nearby worried about losing rank after being knocked aside. So the girl spoke of retreat, but her eyes caught someone rushing forward. Seeing it was a person, she questioned his choice to fight. They then warned Yuki to fall back since he would only lose points. At that moment, the boss turned to Sam and Mika. Suddenly, Sam suggested resting, since their strength is drained, and Mika agreed. But deep down he felt relieved, knowing his damage still ranked highest. Just then Yuki passed by them. The boss noticed him and demanded where he came from. While the boss roared for him to die, Yuki stayed with a sword in his hand. So, the giant raised its fist to slam it down on him. Sam then questioned its fury, and Mika explained Yuki was facing it at only level 20. Hearing this, he cursed Yuki for dragging them into danger. When the fist struck, the area was engulfed in smoke. Yet the boss did not stop, and continued its barrage of punches. Sam was sent flying, so he vowed to make Yuki pay. Seeing another blow coming, he swore to hunt Yuki until he quit. But Yuki halted the giant's strike with his hand, and he was left stunned. When Yuki calmly asked what he had just said, Sam fell into silence. So Yuki told him they could settle later and focus on the boss. The giant, however, grew even more enraged. Yuki took advantage of this moment and lunged forward. He struck it with his fist, dealing 28,000 damage. After it, he quickly switched his sword to his other hand. Then he noted that the boss was not as powerful as he had expected, so he unleashed a series of rapid slashes. Each strike dealt massive damage, quickly reaching 6-digit numbers. As a result, the boss roared in pain, yet he still insulted Yuki as an insect, but Yuki said it was too slow. He then moved swiftly across its body to strike again. This time, he finally dealt damage worth millions. Seeing multiple critical hits, he felt a sense of satisfaction. Before long, the boss's body began to crumble. However, Yuki sensed something was wrong. A blue flame began to swirl, forming a violent tornado. From afar, onlookers saw the giant grow larger, and gathered to watch. Meanwhile, Mika was shocked. Yuki triggered phase 2 and questioned his identity. Moments later, the giant rose larger, with 30% health left. Yuki then attacked once more, and dealt another 1,000,000 points of damage, but to his surprise, it had been reduced by half. Before he could think, the boss's hand shot at him fast. So he vanished in a flash, and escaped as it tried to trap him. After that, he appeared right before its head. He then figured its eyes stayed weak despite its body getting stronger. So he rushed forward, and struck its left eye, dealing 1,000,000 damage. Before pulling away, he struck twice, dealing 3 and 7,000,000 damage. Suddenly, light struck the field, and made the people around lose their health. Meanwhile, he drove his sword into the boss, until its health dropped to 1%. Not long after, it finally reached 0. Sam and Mika then held their breath, waiting for what would happen next. Soon, cracks spread across the giant's body, and it shattered and dispersed into the wind. So Sam cursed in disbelief that Yuki beat a level 100 boss alone, but his voice faltered when Yuki suddenly landed before him. Fear gripped him as he thought Yuki might retaliate for his earlier words. Yet Yuki simply walked past without a glance. Soon, the system announced Yuki killed the boss, won a bracelet, and gained NPC's favor. Upon hearing his name, players realized he was Sagos' new lord, and even killed the boss alone. So many chose to settle in Sagos, and thanked Vicky for her taking them. Vicky received their gratitude and offered jobs or info for a price. Just then, her attention shifted to someone asking if this was Sagos City. Meanwhile, Yuki saw followers behind him and asked why. Mika then voiced interest in him and Sagos, which quickly echoed by others. So she warned more would come soon, because of how he defeated the boss. At the same time in Halma, Hedy anxiously wondered if Yuki's words hid meaning. Sura watched him in confusion as he continued overthinking. He reasoned Yuki did say he won't strike, but he easily gave away the gifts. He also suspected Yuki still saw value in them despite the poor gifts. Thinking of this, he concluded that the value of the gift was still not enough, so he told Sura to come select items for Yuki, which baffled him. Back in Sagos, Vicky greeted Yuki when she saw her. She even asked about his condition and urged treatment if he's hurt, but he assured her he was fine and just hungry, so she asked for a chef. Hearing this, she lightly scolded him for worrying her, then said she had news. Later at the plaza, a large crowd had gathered, so Vicky called for silence and announced the arrival of the city lord. Confused, Yuki asked who they were, and she said they were his recruits. She proudly added they were all talented workers gathered afar. The crowd quickly rushed to Yuki asking for jobs and housing, so he calmed them first and quietly wondered what lives they had endured. Once they settled, he promised these conditions, but only for the capable. Suddenly, a hammer hit the floor, and a man named Oak revealed he was an intermediate smith. Soon after, a woman named Freya said she was a mid-level chef with enhancing dishes. Hearing this, players were shocked since mid-level NPCs were rare. Yuki then called them forward, and they praised his keen eye. After that, he looked at the rest, asking if more wished to apply. Suddenly, another figure raised a hand wanting to join Sagos. However, she first questioned if her safety could be guaranteed. This quickly caused the crowd to suspect she had rare skills or was a criminal. But Yuki calmly assured her she'd be safe, unless he fell or the city collapsed. Hearing this, she removed her hood and declared her intention to work for him. She named herself Kelly, a rare senior chemist, and was unseen since launch, so the players were shocked since other cities can only afford starter-tier chemists. However, Yuki welcomed her to Sagos with confidence. Suddenly, someone shouted he wished to join but was late due to the flame giant. He introduced himself as Savi, an auctioneer, and added that Vicky knew him well. Vicky confirmed it, but warned Yuki he often changed jobs. Even so, Yuki valued his skills, and said the low pay caused it, so he welcomed him. Upon hearing this, Savi expressed his gratitude and pledged his service. Later that afternoon, Yuki finally felt relieved as the NPC issue was resolved and the city took shape. Vicky agreed and asked how he planned to set the tax rate. Yuki was about to ask her about the standards in other cities when Hedy suddenly arrived. Hedy called out and presented a treasure found by his men. He opened it and said he intended to offer it to him. Yuki then found it was an obsidian gem with an unidentified status. This unusual item puzzled him, and also wondered why Hedy kept giving, but he knew refusing might cause trouble, so he kept it. After he thanked Hedy, he returned to his discussion with Vicky. She then explained tax rates varied by terrain, but most were 15 to 20%. He found the rate too high, but Hedy confirmed it was true. She also added that's why many like her are forced to stay in Chaos City. Yuki quickly frowned upon hearing this, so he took out his token and tossed it in the air before stating that he understood. He then declared Sago's tax would be 1%, and Vicky asked if he was sure. He reasoned 1% would suffice once the city thrived, which made her smile. The next day, Oak asked for 10 tempered steel and offered 1 gold, so players quickly rushed forward competing to complete the task. Seeing these quick gains, people noted mid-tier tasks are better, but they noticed a line nearby. Some players there wondered why the shop had not opened after cleaning. Kelly soon appeared holding sanitizer and ordered hand cleaning before entry. As she sprayed them, she explained that she was particular about cleanliness. With that, the players were all transformed clean. Once inside, they were amazed by the potions on display. After all, such items offered 30 points and instant leveling. Suddenly, a girl named Fiona arrived, drawing all eyes as her gap with the second ranker was just 2 levels. Fiona was irritated being called by her name, though she knew she couldn't change it. She then focused on strength potions to help her finish the missions to level up. With that in mind, she bought 2 bottles, and Kelly promptly thanked her for the purchase. As she departed, she recalled the mission rule, so this extra supply is worth it. Just then, a delicious scent caught her attention, so she turned around to see where it's coming from. She then found Freya selling freshly baked buns. After a glance, she saw the food could boost her strength, so she bought 2 dumplings, and Freya agreed. Afterwards, she finally left with many rare items, and hoped to succeed this time. Later, inside the dungeon, she quickly engaged the surrounding monsters. With a single swing, she split one cleanly in half. Due to this, she soon noticed how much easier the buns made each strike. But more enemies approached, and it's signaling the real challenge, so she met them head-on without hesitation. After the fight, she rested, thinking she bled a little but won faster than before, and at last she finally reached the door where the boss was. After drinking a potion to enhance her strength, she pushed it open. She was then immediately welcomed by the demon boss. The boss did not wait and began to attack her, so she countered and dealt 6,000 damage, but this high number caught her off guard. As she steadied herself, she saw the food and potions combined to give far greater boosts. While she wondered if this was the effect of advanced potion, the boss lunged again, but this time she felt confident to fight and prove who was boss. Soon the system announced she cleared the land of chaos and earned the pioneer title. At Malt City Tavern, players were glad by this, though others doubt they can finish the dungeon. They then recalled buns and potions that could help, and wondered where to find it. One player suddenly remembered something, so he hurried off and the others followed, thinking he knew the source. Meanwhile, in the city of Rosen, the city lord gathered with other leaders. He said, since Sagos's new lord rose, their city's lost men and peace was at risk. Another city lord also confirmed Shadi's economy was hit. Hearing this, the others turned to Klaus, asking if he had a solution. Klaus calmly said they would send troops to Sagos to hunt Yuki. They quickly cautioned him that Yuki's power was proven by slaying the giant flame, but he merely sneered, saying that was why they gathered to eliminate Yuki. He quickly offered Mord with 6,000 troops, and asked the rest for the vanguard. The green-haired lord then saw Klaus had no intent to treat them as equals. Still, they agreed to send 2,000 each, but Klaus found it too small. However, he trusted Mord to end Yuki, and asked if they opposed his command. Both lords did not, so he ended by saying they would march once all forces gathered. Meanwhile, at Kelly's potion shop, Yuki observed players fighting over the line. Suddenly, Kelly announced early closure as everything was sold, so the crowd reacted with disappointment, and some even argued. As they planned to return, Yuki knocked, asking if Kelly was there. She quickly opened the door, but he saw her weary face, so she closed it again. Then she returned wearing a mask, and sprayed him with sanitizer. Once inside, she said the buyer surge overwhelmed her. He then saw the empty shelves, and realized merchants were also bulk buying to resell, and judging by her exhaustion, he realized that order must be enforced. At that moment he thought of Savi, so he woke her and suggested auctioning her potions, which left her confused. He then explained Savi could run auctions, giving her steady profit and lighter work. She then quickly agreed, and planned 30 bottles in advance to keep rest days free. Yuki confirmed and explained scarcity would let her charge more. After settling the matter, he finally left the shop. Outside, he found Vicky praising him for solving their problem, so he asked why she came. She said she had worried for Kelly, yet his swift response made it needless. But he suddenly seized her and told her timing was perfect. He also told her he had an important announcement, which left her confused. He then declared she will be governor, yet she thought he meant something else. However, she was shocked to realize he wanted her as governor. The crowd then saw his token rise as Vicky was formally named governor. Afterward, he asked if she doubted herself, and she said governors need clean records, so her trading in Chaos City left her labeled untrustworthy. But he pointed out his own rise in Chaos City, and she couldn't argue further. Before they could continue, the sound of a horn echoed outside. The system soon notified him that Rosen City and Shadi City had declared war. Beyond the gates, Klaus saw Sago's poverty and ordered Mord to seize it. However, when Yuki appeared, he signaled his troops to halt, but he recognized his resolve to fight them alone, so he ordered him to treat them seriously. Yuki said fighting all at once was trouble, so he invited the guards to join his city. Klaus quickly laughs at his attempt to buy them off. but he claimed to understand him and have him fight Mord to be their vassal city. Mord stepped forward admitting Yuki's valor, but said he must fight. After he dismounted, he drew his sword and ordered Yuki to do the same. Yuki then took out his sword, saying he's tired of them talking non-stop. As he said this, flames began to coil around his blade and surprised Mord. In the next instant, he moved so quickly that Mord could not even react. But instead of him, he appeared before Klaus and silenced him in a single blow. The system then announced the death of the Lord of Rosen. With the disturbance gone, Yuki asked who would join Sagos. Mord was shaken by this, and realized Yuki's killing intent alone overwhelmed them, so he dropped his weapon and bowed, pledging himself to Sagos. The remaining lords also saw his strength and fled. However, Yuki blocked them and demanded why they gathered forces to invade. The city lord tried to explain, but his companion claimed the troops were an offering. When asked about Klaus, they denied ties and claimed they were forced. They even traded their army for survival, but Yuki also imposed a toll. The green-haired lord hesitated, while the other quickly agreed. He laid down 10,000 gold and urged Yuki to take it. Satisfied by this, he allowed them to leave, but he also reminded them of a border toll, with interest doubling each day that they must pay. So the lord muttered Yuki was exploiting them, but he was told to stay quiet. Meanwhile, Yuki returned to the city with the soldiers and the gold. Vicky quickly teased him over the spectacle, so he reminded her of her duty. He then introduced her to Mord for the arrangements, and Mord paid respect. With that being said, he warned her not to fail her first task, and she agreed. But as he prepared to leave, someone called out to him. He then saw Fiona, who finally confirmed that the city lord of Sagos is a player. However, he has no idea who she was, so she introduced herself as the current top-ranked player. After she asked if she's amazing, he replied that he had heard her name before. He then recalled her Land of Chaos guide and its potion tips, which boomed Kelly's shop. However, he assumed she came for ad payment, but she quickly denied it. Instead, she asked him to hire her for her skill. He then asked what was the big deal about her. She insisted she was first rank, yet he asked if she could replace NPCs. Hearing this, she admitted that she could not. He also asked if she had city management experience, and she answered no. So he finally left, telling her she could return when she had the skills they needed. She then shouted in anger that no player could equal NPC mastery, but he did not respond and left her alone. Even so, she refused to give up and vowed to make him understand. Later after that, she began tailing him. She watched as he spoke with the soldiers already working, then asked about Vicky. Learning she was at the west gate with Mord, he thanked them and left. While soldiers began praising his kindness and generosity, Fiona passed by them, but the soldiers confronted her for following Yuki, so she clarified it was not. Meanwhile, Yuki found Vicky and Mord and told them he needed them. He then asks both her and Mord about the soldiers. Vicky assured things were set, and Mord agreed and also mentioned leading drills. However, Yuki told him to submit soldier needs to Vicky and told her to fund it. After agreeing, Mord left to begin his work. He then turned to Vicky about the auction, and she said it was ready and profit was certain. Setting that aside, he asked if she knew an appraiser since he had something to evaluate. She replied she knew Lady Wensa, a renowned appraiser in Roka City of Lord Nobu. While she advised against it after he threatened them, he already began leaving. Meanwhile, Fiona felt dejected after being found out and losing Yuki. Just then, a horse-drawn carriage passed by. She quickly saw Yuki was the one riding it. While she ordered him not to escape, Yuki wondered if someone called. Later after that, he finally arrived at the east gate of Roka City, where the guards quickly stopped him. He then recalled that his prestige still branded him a criminal, but this thing also made him smile. He then told them his intent was only to request Wensa's aid, so he smiled and said he'd forget this if they allowed him through. The guards quickly relented and pretended they had not seen him. Not long after, Fiona arrived as well. She noticed it was Roka City and wondered why Yuki was here. She then asked the guards if an adventurer had just passed. The guards quickly broke into a cold sweat, yet they insisted they had seen nothing and remembered nothing. She accepted their denial and chose to look for him in the city, but afraid Yuki might suspect them, they refused and their words confused her. Later that night, a woman was sipping tea when a knock came at her door. She then approached the door wondering who it was. When she opened it, Yuki stood there asking if she was Wensa. This made her laugh as she thought he imagined her as elderly. Setting that aside, she invited him in and he accepted. Once seated, she guessed he had something valuable and he asked her to examine it. She gazed at the obsidian gem and quickly recognized the Sadru lineage. Meanwhile, in his office, Nobu was stunned to hear an adventurer had entered the city. Learning the adventurer was Yuki, according to reports, he began to ponder. He knew of the unpaid toll but doubted Yuki would claim it now. But when he learned Yuki was with Lady Wensa, he ordered offerings prepared at once. Back at Yuki's side, he asked Wensa about the Sadru family. She told him they had ruled the land once, prompting him to ask why only stories remained. She revealed the Sadru were peaceful and gifted, but their compassion brought downfall. Other races exploited them and hunted them to extinction before they could rise. Setting that aside, she noted the obsidian might require extended examination, but he suddenly stood and interrupted her. He told her he no longer sought appraisal, but wished to invite her to stay in Sagos. She was surprised by this and said it was an honor, but she clarified she needed the city lord's approval, so he resolved to use Nobu's unpaid debt. She welcomed his intent and continued the appraisal, and he offered his thanks. However, another knock came at the door, and he offered to answer it. When he opened it, Nobu stood outside, greeting him warmly. He then noted his timing was perfect and declared his intent to recruit Wensa. Nobu agreed without hesitation upon hearing this, so Wensa was utterly shocked, and when Yuki pressed her to leave now, she mentioned the gem. However, he had already taken hold of her. He explained that it could wait but not him, so she asked if Nobu had truly yielded so fast. Nobu confirmed it and even cheerfully sent them off. He also reminded Yuki of the payment and asked if it should be sent to Sagos. Yuki replied it could instead be used to aid Wensa's relocation, so he assured him the best transport would be arranged for her possessions. Meanwhile, Fiona climbed the city walls, only to see Yuki's carriage departing already. Later, at Yuki's mansion, Wensa began appraising the gem. After some time, she completed the identification, but she said a seal blocked its secrets, so Yuki told her she'd done enough. From this, he learned the gem was a key to Sadru's holy land, though its site was unclear. Wensa said she'd never heard of it, but had a map of Sadru's old valley. She handed it to him, suggesting he might find useful clues there. Yuki gratefully accepted the map, thanking her for the valuable information. Then, he told Vicky to take Wensa to rest and help Nobu with her move. With that settled, he decided to personally investigate Kroran Valley. Later, his carriage arrived at the Kroran Mountains. After stepping down, he dismissed the carriage. Then he looked around wondering if this was truly Sadru's territory, but the preserved serenity made their settlement understandable. He also noticed animals unafraid of humans, likely due to Sadru's family. However, he looked at the gem thinking he had no idea where the Holy Land was, but it suddenly began to glow. Not far away, Fiona, who had been secretly following him, saw him vanish. She was alarmed by this and rushed over. Yet she found nothing and was confused about his sudden disappearance. Meanwhile, Yuki found himself falling into a hidden cave. Water dripped from the ceiling and splashed onto his face, which woke him. He quickly sat up and realized he was in an unfamiliar place. He then tried to open his system interface to check how long he had been unconscious, but he was stunned to see nothing responded. Unable to access panels or inventory, he wondered if it was a malfunction. He considered forcing a logout, but he feared he'd never come back, so he considered it as a rare chance and decided to explore the place. He then grasped his sword, remembering when he thought it a burden, but he realized it was good he'd taken the sword out of the backpack slot. Just then, the gem in his pocket lit up again. He took it out and wondered if it had brought him to the Holy Land. But as he moved forward, he collided with a wall. He ended up falling due to this and began wondering what it was. Looking up, he saw a massive door standing before him. He also noticed a groove in the door that seemed perfectly shaped for the gem. So he looked at the gem, wondering if it urged him to place it in the groove. Without further ado, he placed the gem into the slot. The door responded at once and welcomed him to Sadru's Holy Land. Inside, a figure said Sadru had fallen and Yuki must face trials for ancestral power. Yuki assumed it was a recording, but questioned the meaning of ancestral power, so he decided to step closer. The figure quickly asked if he wished to begin the first trial, and without hesitation he agreed. So, the man praised his courage as a portal appeared behind him. A shadow leopard emerged, and the man said Yuki must earn its trust to gain the clan's aid. Though unsure, Yuki decided the answer was battle and unleashed his villain skill. The leopard also did not hesitate and lunged at him. So, in a single motion, he cut the creature cleanly in half. The man was visibly stunned witnessing this, but Yuki's gaze shifted toward him. He asked if the man could speak, but the man quickly shifted to the second trial. So he urged him not to act like a recording, but the man declared the next trial had started. Before he could respond further, something flew above him. A thunderbird emerged, and the man said Yuki must win its favor to gain the clan's strength. Yuki was still questioning the situation when the creature attacked. In an instant, he was lifted into the air by swirling currents. Realizing it controlled wind, he knew close combat was useless, so he took out his sword and hurled his sword directly at the creature. The blade directly struck the bird, and it vanished immediately. Yuki then fell back to the ground, saying the trial was easy. However, he became worried about facing a strong foe next, since his skill was fading. So he asked if more trials awaited or if they could simply talk instead. The man replied, each round drained energy, and the next stage would only start after a week. Hence, he urged Yuki to prepare, but he answered only with a flat stare, so he furiously questioned his reaction. Yuki brushed off the question, saying he'd return in a week and wanted to leave now. Once he was transported out, the man let out a long sigh of relief. He also began to question Yuki's need for power and how the ancestors ever lost. Meanwhile, outside, Yuki suddenly reappeared right in front of Fiona. Seeing her there, he asked what she was doing and whether she had been following him. She quickly denied it, saying she was just passing and he was the one who vanished, but he was stunned to learn that he'd gone only briefly. He quickly suspected sanctuary time differed and planned to confirm it next week, but Fiona confronted him, vowing not to leave until he let her join Sagos. He then offered a role if she proved herself, and she quickly asked if he meant it. The thought alone made her excited, but he quickly reminded her to let him finish. She then calmly said she would prove herself, and asserted she could face any test. He quickly suggested the Tower of Challenges as a dungeon to measure her ability. To his surprise, she agreed at once, so he asked if she would not reconsider, but she urged him not to underestimate her since she held the tower record. Later on the first floor, a goblin rushed at her as they entered, yet she cut it down easily and moved forward, saying early floors were nothing special. By the 10th floor, she had already defeated the Minotaur guard, and on the 20th, she cleared the monsters without difficulty. Before long, they arrived at floor 30, facing a huge rock monster. She then declared that it was time to show her true ability, and in an instant, she vanished from her spot. Then she reappeared before the monster, striking its shoulder with precision. The attack split through its body, and the creature crumbled apart. While she paused to breathe, Yuki told her he had seen enough to know her strength, so he suggested they return and rest. But she felt underestimated and decided to push onward. He then watched her leave puzzled because he thought his words were fine. Eventually, they reached the floor where the boss awaited them. The goblins there looked far more extravagant and caught their attention. So she cautioned him she could not defend, and he agreed. With that, she rushed forward onto the goblins. Then her sword goes flashing as she unleashes a series of rapid slashes. The large goblin leader noticed her attack and swung its claymore in response. Though she stopped the blow, she felt this floor's monsters were tougher. At that moment, another goblin leapt toward her. She stepped back to evade. However, a third one appears behind her, so she was forced to raise her sword to block the knives. Soon, she was locked in a relentless exchange of blows. However, with two goblins closing in, she saw the fight could not be prolonged, so her gaze sharpened as she unleashed power, blasting the goblins away. Without pause, she dashed after them, where she draws her sword once more, before vanishing from sight. In the next instant, multiple slashes cut through the air. When she finally reappeared, the goblins collapsed one after another. When all of them exploded mid-air, she asked Yuki if he had seen it, but he only yawned, asking if she was finished, which angered her. She then questioned his dozing and pressed to ascend further, yet he said he knew her strength and wanted to lead next, to which she agreed. Back on the first floor, the goblin questioned their return, but Yuki casually kicked it aside without pause. Fiona found it cruel, though he replied he could crush them with a single strike. By the 10th floor, he had already pierced the Minotaur with ease, and on the 20th, he cut down all the monsters in a single attack. At the 30th floor, he crushed the rock monster barehanded, so Fiona wondered how, but she recalled stronger monsters awaited, and waited for his confidence to break. Not long after, she excitedly pointed out the goblins ahead. He simply drew his weapon, wondering if it was finally time to use it. With one slash, he cut them down, and called them needlessly flashy. She was left stunned once again at how easily he handled them. As they continued, she realized he was only level 22 and relied solely on basic strikes, but she believed his captaincy weakened monsters, and he'll fail soon. Yet she faltered at the beast's absence on the floor, and he said he didn't see clearly. Her faith in her knowledge then wavered as his actions lay beyond her reach. By the 32nd floor, she finally found he was actually erasing monsters instantly. She then recalled floor 40 was tough, yet he advanced simply and seemed stronger. Just then, he asked if the beasts ahead were shadow panthers, and she confirmed. She also explained the beasts were swift and deadly. However, his focus was already on the obsidian gem to test something. He quickly lifted the gem and told them to submit, which baffled her. But the panthers obeyed, and she realized he was using them to progress. Suddenly, he told her to pick one and try riding it, saying it was interesting. So the two later rode forward while she stayed in disbelief. At the 42nd floor, she warned him of thunderbirds that struck hard, yet he used the gem again, commanding them just as before. Soon, they moved on with the animals, and she felt her words were useless. By the 43rd floor, the monsters waiting ahead initially stood their ground, but the sight of Yuki's creatures made them recoil in fear. Regardless, Yuki ordered his beasts to kill them. The leopards and the thunderbirds attack at once. Fiona watched this and thought these beasts had no link, yet they battled together, so she looked at Yuki and wondered how he did it. Meanwhile, Yuki realized pets gain strength from masters, enough to form an army. Once done, he patted a leopard and told Fiona to head up. Moments later, she asked how he became city lord and tamed monsters. He said it was a long story, and he'd show her someday. Later at the 50th floor, they finally arrived. The level 59 lighting crofts saw them, and said challengers were rare here. Fiona was also surprised to see the unique boss had a clone as guardian of this floor. Suddenly, Crofts commented that the leopards had betrayed their master, but he questions if they really think they are worthy of challenging him. Yuki stepped in, saying he'd fight, but Fiona urged him to stay with his pets, so he just smiled and urged her to watch him. Crofts heard this and quickly attacked him, but his lightning did not even lessen Yuki's health. He found it arrogant and vowed revenge. He began forming a lightning ball in his hand. Then he blasted him with deadly lightning beams. However, Yuki was unaffected by this attack. Seeing this, Crofts began to ask if he uses shield skill to stop his attack, yet Yuki replied he knew nothing of the shield, which enraged him further. He declared he'd use his strongest move to send Yuki to hell. Fiona then called out to Yuki and urged retreat if they couldn't win. However, she was stunned by what unfolded before her eyes. She saw Yuki punch Crofts barehanded. After sending Crofts into the ground, he turned to Fiona and asked what he can do for her. Meanwhile, Crofts began questioning why his attacks didn't work, but Yuki noted he still managed to cut 0.2% of his health, so he vowed to ease his death as recognition. Crofts then pleaded for life by offering anything, which made him question his capability. So he pointed at the leopards, saying he could climb the tower with him. However, Yuki pointed out he trusted the beasts, but not him, so he replied that he has only one last option. And this made Yuki ask what he plans to do. He then offered the Thunderstone through his main body's return. Yet he was ignorant of the Thunderstone and wished Vicky were here. But with the strength already proven, he decided to leave with Fiona. After that, they finally teleported out of the floor. Crofts then sighed in relief now that he's finally gone. However, another magic circle appeared on the floor. A figure appeared through it and called his name. Upon hearing this, he quickly recognized the voice. He then saw the Master Reaper, and he was accused of trading in his territory. He tried to reason but stayed silent, so the Reaper told him not to be flustered. The Reaper then reminded him of his service to reduce 3 centuries in the underworld. Crofts heard this and fell to his knees. So, the Reaper asked if he was ready to pay for breaking the rules, and he said he was. The Reaper quickly added 100 years on him, which shocked him. He was then asked if he had objections, and he said no. However, he questioned why rules were not made earlier. The Reaper quickly reasoned, he gains 100 years each time it is broken. After this, he bid farewell and told Crofts to perform well. Meanwhile, outside the tower, Yuki and Fiona were congratulated for reaching the 50th floor. Fiona then felt joy receiving a rare weapon. While Yuki casually leveled to 25, he asked her if she was happy and she agreed, but she was still furious that her attempt to show off failed miserably. Nevertheless, she told him she would listen next time and he agreed. Later outside Sagos, she noticed many people and wondered why. The players on the other hand began shouting for Yuki to come out. Mord then threatened to arrest them if they kept making noise. Fiona also noticed they were red and named and thought of a siege, but Yuki knew their aim. So he ordered Mord to open the gates, which drew the players' attention. After entering, they all cheered for Yuki and said Sagos was better than Chaos City. Meanwhile, Vicky rushed to Yuki, saying the red named players had arrived. So he then asked if Fiona remembered his new name for Sagos, and she said she was absent. Yet she managed to hear about the new Chaos City. He said yes and noted Sagos was better than Chaos, so letting red names in would boost it. However, she worried red names might cause trouble. So Vicky explained that Sagos has high-quality guards, and they can't beat Yuki. With that being said, he welcomes her once again to the new Chaos City. The next day, a recruitment event was held at the plaza. The players then asked if joining as adventurers meant serving as Sagos soldiers. The recruiter confirmed this and asked if they were interested. The players inquired about benefits, and she replied they were good. She then tried to recall Vicky's details, but soon forgot the exact words. Meanwhile, Yuki headed to the Dark Night Forest with Fiona, but she asked why he made her log in early when the map was level 80. Hearing this, he simply noted the forest stayed dim at daybreak. She then proposed going back, as the cold was strange and they weren't yet level 80. However, he only said to dress warmer, which made her insist he missed her meaning. Nevertheless, he said level alone meant little, and she agreed since he showed it true. So he broke into a run, proclaiming it was all for Sagos City. Fiona then stood alone, hesitating as she wasn't yet part of Sagos. Gritting her teeth, she ran after him, knowing at worst she'd lose points. After some time, she realized that he had vanished once again, so she began calling out for him, asking him to come out. Just then, something wet dripped onto her head. She wondered if it had started raining, but she looked up and froze as a shadow leopard loomed above. The beast did not hesitate and leapt toward her. She was then pinned to the ground, and she thought it was the end. But the leopard ceased its advance, as Yuki shouted she was his friend. Seeing him appear, she rushed forward shouting that she had missed him. She clung to his leg, protesting he left her with a monster. But Yuki beckoned the shadow leopard, and it looked completely harmless. Setting that aside, he said she wasn't told to follow, and she protested he had invited her. But he ignored the question, and instead urged her to try riding the leopard. As she sat atop, she noted the familiar feel, and he told her it was hers now. The leopard then ran as she asked if it was dangerous, and he said she was safe. After that, she asked if they planned to bring leopards, but he said there was no need. He pointed behind saying they would use that, and she saw it was a teleportation array. She then noted how costly it was, and asked if he would seek donations like other governors. He replied he would not waste gold, and would use the array, yet she remained uneasy. Later, as he readied the array, she asked why he made a city when he's strong. He explained no city wanted a player like him, so he made his own. She then said he needed no protection, and believed too much strength spoiled the fun. So she asked why he kept playing, and he said the NPCs were the most interesting. To him, it felt like another world where NPCs were real, so he truly liked the game and wanted others to see its potential. He also thinks games were best when everyone joined in, which surprised her, since it echoed the same thoughts she had when she first started creating strategies. A moment later, he said it was time to return, but she called out to him. She then vowed to support him no matter what, and hearing this, he replied that he believed in her. Later, on their return, players saw Fiona on a leopard and realized mounts existed. Not long after they reached the plaza, and Yuki told Fiona it was time to recruit. So he cleared his throat and called everyone to gather for an announcement. While players quickly turned towards him, the recruiter grew restless. Yuki then declared Fiona the leaderboards first and asked for applause. Then he told them the leopard was an elite beast, now serving as Fiona's mount. With that, he announced all who joined Sagos Legion would receive a leopard, and in his words the players quickly cheered and pledged to Sagos. Later, after distributing the leopards, he began explaining the Legion rules, but one player silently opposed control and sought to play free. So, with his mount secured, he tried to leave, but Yuki ordered him to stay. In the next instant, the player was sent flying off his seat by the leopard. Yuki then sighed, saying he had warned them, as screams began to echo. After a while, the player was finally resurrected. Yuki then asked if he still dared to leave, to which the man said no and returned. Moving on, Yuki said the punishment was clear, and quitting meant reporting to Fiona. He also reassured them the rules were light, but leaving meant losing the leopard and bonuses. Hence, he warned this chance was unique, so they should consider carefully. He also promised training at Night Forest, yet Fiona murmured this wasn't agreed. So he replied it wasn't so different, just new ways to play. He also said that after training they could launch city sieges, and after seizing more land, even NPCs couldn't ignore him. He also mused that hidden second jobs in cities could replace his tyrant path. Amused by this, Yuki laughed and made Fiona long for her earlier emotion. Meanwhile, back at the stand, the recruiter finally recalled the mount reward. However, by then, the surrounding crowd had already dispersed. Back on the grounds, Fiona confirmed all Legion members were present. She then asked Yuki if they should depart, and he agreed. After teleporting them away, he said they must not fail. He then thought the Legion's start was easy, and Fiona's skill would prevent issues, but remembering city matters, he hurried back. Along the way, he thought another legion must form to conquer cities. Yet the cost was high, since even keeping a teleport array needed 10,000 gold, so he thought leopards as mounts meant Thunderbird would not be a problem. Still, a second teleport array cost 20,000, so he thought of auction profit, but he pushed forward, and certain his goals would lead to his Saint Knight dream. The thought made him laugh, but someone suddenly called out. He turned and saw Wensa, so he asked why she was there. She said Nobu brought her things and told her to serve him well. She then confessed she thought her role was just appraisal. Yuki realized at once that Nobu's view was wrong, so he clarified she was only invited for her talent, which surprised her. She then shyly asked about her room, leaving him unsure if his words convinced her. Even so, he told her to rest, and have Vicky arrange rooms later. He left after saying this, and she called him feeling confused. After finding a place to hide, he accepted he couldn't return to the mansion. But he heard someone ask why he hadn't returned, and quickly knew it was Vicky. While comforted by her return, she pressed him about being in trouble. So, after explaining briefly, she assured him she'd handle Wentz's arrangement. After that, she raised military costs and hinted at something interesting. She handed him a document, which he recognized as a bounty order. She revealed the request to explore dwarven ruins carried 30,000 gold reward. He then assured her he could manage and promised good news soon. Later, he boarded a carriage, but he was told another rider shared the route, and he agreed to share. A moment later, a level 37 player named Yaya arrived. He quickly noticed her attire marked a special role, and wondered why she stood there. Then he remembered he is a red name player. Thinking it didn't matter if she refused to ride, he left it at that. but seeing her actually enter, he concluded she was confident in herself, yet he let it go as he thought they might not meet again. Once the carriage began moving, time passed quickly. Soon the coachman woke him, announcing their arrival. As he paid the fare, he asked if there were any ruins nearby. He confirmed ruins were at the summit, but warned all who went vanished. Yet he ignored the warning, so the coachman marveled at his courage. As he walked deeper, something burst from the bushes. Yaya appeared, aiming a gun, and demanded why he followed. He clarified he came for the ruin, and asked if she headed there. When she confirmed it, he suggested that they travel together. She quickly agreed under threat of death for suspicion, and he accepted. But he also thought her earlier shot might have ended him, and her restraint intrigued him. Along the way, they met monsters, and she struck them down with precise gunfire. Then she fought off a pack of wolves with her knife, and even threw bombs at them, which wiped out pursuing enemies with ease. So Yuki remarked she surpassed Fiona, yet she answered with a cold threat. But he continued to propose they share their rewards, and assure her fair treatment. Before he could say more, she vanished from sight. Suddenly she was at his back and rejected his offer as unworthy. Without hesitation, she struck his neck. Then she leapt away and hurled several knives toward him. Upon landing, she raised her gun. Then she fired directly at his head. Just as she readied a bomb, he asked if he was now qualified. She then saw him at full health and asked if she wished to continue. But she finally said she'd hide her skills from a temporary ally, and they cooperated. Later, the ruin's entrance, Yuki admired dwarven craft, but she noted he'd barely helped. So he told her not to say that, and asked how to open the door. He then began to look around and pulled the hidden switch he found. However, Yaya's cry made him spin around. He rushed into the passage to help, but she said she wasn't in danger. Just as she urged him to watch his footing, he had already jumped and fell to the water. So her words ended when he appeared in front of her. After that, she told him to stop soaking and pointed at the stairs. They reached safely, and she criticized him, but he explained he was just worried. So she dropped the matter and asked for their next move. He pointed at another lever nearby and suggested pulling it, but she warned that it might be another trap. Yet he acted too soon, so she told him to listen first. At that moment, a wall slid open, revealing something rising from within. They stepped closer and were both stunned. As Yuki examined it, he wondered if it was some form of ancient technology. His interest even grew when it began to stand. However, its arm impaled him, and Yaya hastily told him to retreat, but he thrilled at its might and suggested they haul it back to guard the city. So she decided to shoot it, and the robot quickly fell back. Yuki then rose and questioned her, but she replied they couldn't waste time on that. Still, he told her to let him repair it next time first, and this time she agreed. They soon faced a blazing barrier that sealed the passage. Yaya figured her rope was useless and told him they must detour, but he stepped forward, telling her to wait while he disabled it. She then began to wonder if the flames were only illusion, yet when she tested it, the heat burned her and took half of her health. So she looks at Yuki, wondering why it doesn't hurt him. Meanwhile, Yuki feels he's just bathing in a hot spring due to his fire resistance bead. He soon pulled the lever and called for her to follow. She then demanded how he was unaffected, yet he only said to hurry. Soon, they encountered a spinning blade that Yuki wanted to take and made her ask why. He ignored her and reached out, but was cut by the blades, so he quickly threw it away to stop it. With this, he realized the dwarven trap needed a power source, and she said that was natural, so they continued forward and reached the central area. Yuki began saying the bounty was too high for such ruins, but she disagreed. She also added the reward wasn't high and asked how the gold would be split. He was then stunned to see hers was 3,000 while his was 30,000. She showed surprise too, so he asked where she obtained it. She explained she was a bounty hunter and her mentor assigned all tasks. Hearing her words, he questioned if she knew how to check a bounty order, but she looked at him with a confused expression. So he explained only guild-sealed orders were valid and hers might not be. She then cursed her unreliable mentor and swore to leave once she's licensed, but this made him feel sorry for her because mentors were always troublesome. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber, mocking them as fresh prey. In front of them, a machine began to transform. It even let out a distorted laugh as it addressed them as foolish humans. Yaya quickly consumed a potion to boost her evasion, preparing to test how long she could endure. But the machine warned them not to try, since they had no chance to survive. A cage soon formed around them as it declared that it controlled the entire ruin. It then launched its attacks, urging them to give up. Yaya swiftly dodged and questioned why Yuki was still standing. Yuki, however, calmly found the beam was draining life force. The machine then asked if he was afraid and said mercy was too late. However, the two were just busy discussing the fraction of health the beam took. So the machine grew confused as to why they were calm. It then suspected Yuki had rare vitality and declared him the perfect vessel. So it announced that instead of killing him, it would take over his body. Yuki replied calmly, asking if it meant to stay here to live a dull life. The machine claimed they were already trapped, but Yuki asked if this was its only power. He then ripped open the dwarven cage and said he was leaving. The machine was furious at being ignored, so it summoned another massive robot, declaring that they had forced it to take things this far. However, Yuki grew excited with the weapon, but the robot began to stomp on them, so Yaya hurried away. Its feet then ended up falling right into Yuki's spot, but it did not stop and continued stomping the ground. Yaya saw this and shouted at Yuki to be careful. The machine then ordered the robot to strike the final blow, but a bomb fell on it, and it exploded instantly. Yaya continued forward, knowing if Yuki died, she could never beat the robot. However, he appeared behind her, and asked not to blow up the robot. He even lifted her, and told her he would solve the problem. After he successfully distanced her from the robot, he turned to the machines, thinking how to stop them. He even considered binding them before anything else. The machine panicked at his strength, and chose to forcefully take his body, so it proceeds to rush forward with a plan to kill him. When the beam landed, Yuki realized Bacchus was trying to enslave him with a contract. But since Yuki was stronger, Bacchus was bound as his servant. Bacchus then proclaimed that Yuki's body was his, so Yaya rushed to check on Yuki, who had fallen silent. However, Bacchus panicked when he couldn't control him. Yuki quickly explained that players cannot be taken over, which puzzled Yaya. He said Bacchus had bound himself as a servant, which panicked him further. Regardless, he ordered Bacchus to join the robot and follow to Sagos. Bacchus resisted, saying he could not leave a soulless body, so Yuki replied coldly that death was easier, as he now held Bacchus's life. Bacchus yielded and merged with the giant, as Yuki told him to move in circles. Yaya even joined them and was puzzled. Setting that aside, Yuki ordered Bacchus to follow as they left. Not long after, they discovered a hidden exit and left the ruins, so Yuki realized the climb was pointless, and Yaya teased that he always overcomplicates. As they moved on, he asked what she planned to do next. She replied her goal was finding Shirley and taking back her gold. He then told her to go to Sagos as she required his support. But he saw her head for a carriage, so he decided to follow. However, he paused, wondering how to bring Bacchus along. Meanwhile, at the auction house, a crowd had already gathered. In the VIP section, level 22, Clark sat in luxury to avoid common players. Suddenly he was told 100,000 gold was ready. However, he dismissed it as too little, and ordered 900,000 more. The guard replied they'd bought all, and extra coins were overpriced. Yet, he told his guard to proceed so he could stand as the auction's lead. Meanwhile on stage, Savvy told Vicky everything was ready. He then asked if Yuki would return, but she said she wasn't sure. So he said it was a pity, as the auction would make history. Moving on, he finally welcomed the crowd to the auction. Suddenly, Vicky heard a familiar voice asking if the auction had begun. She saw Yuki return and told him he was just in time. Knowing this, he took out an item to add to the auction. Then he told her to show Savi the updated list backstage. She saw it was dwarven craft worth 50,000 and asked how he got it, but he only said it was secret and went to bid as well. Back on stage, Savi introduced the Swift Potion, with price hitting 1,000 gold. Yuki listened as bids rose to 1,200 before Savi declared the winner. However, he noticed a familiar figure below. It was Yaya, and he immediately had someone invite her to his room. Before long, she arrived and questioned why he was there. While he asked why he can't be here, she remarked this box is expensive, so he casually affirmed and asked if she had resolved her business first. She replied all was settled peacefully, though he saw her name bore a red mark now. Suddenly, Savi opened Phase 2, setting all bids at 1,000 gold. He then revealed a level 30 epic leather armor. Yaya was left stunned seeing this, as this was an epic equipment, yet she saw Yuki casually placed a bid of 1,000. Shortly after, Savi announced a bid of 1,200 from Clark. Clark then smiled and noted that something worthy of his attention had appeared. As bidding rose, Yaya asked if Yuki specialized in leather armor, but he replied that he was a light armor specialist. Not long after, Savi announced the armor sold to Clark for 3,600. As the next item came out, Yuki bid, so Yaya asked if he was bidding to drive it up. He casually offered to bid for her, but she admitted she had no money. Soon, Savi announced Clark had won the epic leggings for 2,000 gold. Clark listened and thought the auction now seemed dull. Suddenly, his guard offered to keep buying golds, yet he stopped at 500,000. Meanwhile, Yuki encouraged Yaya to bid for the thrill. He urged her to place the next bid, and she was startled. But he pointed at the weapon and told her to bid the maximum, so she told him not to fault her if the bid climbed, and he agreed. She then pressed the button several times, so Savi announced Yuki's 5,000 offer should secure the item. Clark heard this, and suspected it was a challenge to him. Meanwhile, Yaya confessed to overpressing, though Yuki was unfazed. So she asked what if no one raised the price, and he said money wasn't an issue. Suddenly, Clark raised the price to 7,000, which Yaya felt was excessive. However, Clark stayed confident since he's the richest man's son. To his surprise, Yuki immediately pushed the bid to 10,000. The numbers continued to climb as Savi announced each increase. So, at 19,900, he remarked he'd never seen such fierce bidding. Suddenly, Clark raised the price to 50,000 gold coins, so the hammer fell and the item was sold to him. With that, Clark wondered if anyone still dared to challenge him, but his attention soon shifted to the next item. He saw a box and became curious about it. However, Savi said the name would stay hidden, as some might bid too quickly. He then called on the audience to witness a masterpiece. As the display case opened, he revealed an ancient dwarven craft. It's a spider-type machine with a starting price of 50,000 gold coins. The crowd reacted instantly, and bids surged to 100,000. Savi then noted it could run endlessly at peak intensity when powered. He also added it could serve in battle, so they must take this chance. Clark grew furious as bids rose, and baffled how others could afford such sums. He even suspected gold was scarce because others secretly hoarded it. Meanwhile, Yaya asked Yuki if the machine had come from the ruins. He confirmed the find was real and suited for sale. On hearing it was usable, she wondered why he let it go. He explained, Bacchus mastered dwarven tech, so there will be more. Meanwhile, Clark told his guard to amass more gold regardless of expense. The guard then doubted it's worth it, but Clark insisted. Yaya soon saw the gold rate jump to 1 to 300, so she decided to sell the gold coins she held and Yuki agreed. After she left, Vicky arrived and asked what Yuki needed. He then instructed her to transfer city gold to him, and she complied. Soon, Savi congratulated Clark for bidding 1.2 million and closed the auction. Later in the settlement room, Yuki and Clark finally met. Clark realized Yuki was his opponent and questioned his presence despite no purchase. He then believed Yuki came to collect and urged him not to reveal himself. Yuki admitted he was there for payment and instructed Savi to complete it. He also revealed the craft was his, and that selling gold at high prices restored supply. So he casually took his leave, even offering a brief word of thanks. Clark clenched his fists in anger, glaring after him and silently vowing to make him pay. Later at the Thunderbird habitat, Yuki reached the peak and felt the strong spiritual aura. Soon, a towering level 90 Thunderbird appeared before him. Back in Sago City, Fiona saw the teleportation array flare nearby. Yuki soon appeared atop a Thunderbird, and this surprised her. But his gaze fell on her red name, and she explained it had almost killed her. She revealed that soldiers from Shak saw some of them with red names and pursued them. So now everyone in her group had been marked as well. Hearing this, he recalled the nearby city was close to Sagos and thought of visiting, so he quickly took off on his mount as Fiona called for him to slow down. Meanwhile, in Shak City's council chamber, leaders gathered. It was reported their forces faced Sagos' adventurers and fell to Shadow Leopard attacks. After hearing this, the city lord asked the messenger to stand down. Then he turned his attention to his son Mike, who seemed deep in thought. Mike then said he went to Sagos last night's auction and saw something remarkable. The city lord was then astonished that Yuki mastered dwarven craft secrets. He knew dwarven lore was rare and Sagos tie is vital, yet conflict had begun. Suddenly, a soldier rushed in, reporting an adventurer riding giant bird in the square. He also added that the person was Yuki. The city lord then grew nervous, wondering why he came so fast, but his subordinates are already asking if they should fight or surrender. After a brief silence, he ordered everyone to face Sagos with full resolve. However, Mike advised restraint since Sagos was dangerous to challenge. His father agreed but said yesterday's clash made reversal impossible. Despite this, Mike decided he would attempt to negotiate, but his father shouted at him to stop. Then he stepped up, saying he would go as well. At the city square, he approached Yuki and confirmed his identity. Yet Yuki wasted no time and ordered surrender or ruin. So Mike asked if this was due to yesterday's clash, but Yuki dismissed the idea. He announced his plan to conquer all cities around, starting with Shak. The city lord grew furious at this, and vowed that he would not leave alive. However, Yuki reminded them, adventurers never fear death. He repeated his demand and unleashed a crushing aura. He even pressed for them to hurry because he will go to the next city. Mike then asked what Yuki required if they chose to surrender. He also insisted they would not aid his wars. He replied, Shak must serve Sagos and pay tribute, not fight. Father and son shared a glance and were clearly astonished. After considering, they surrendered, and this pleased Yuki. So he left the city on his Thunderbird without further delay. Mike was then glad that his father did not mess with Yuki, but he stated he would not submit easily, knowing Yuki's expansion would face opposition. So he aimed to collect intel from Sagos and unite cities to resist Yuki. However, if Yuki proved too strong, he would cooperate for peace. Hence, he advised Mike that solutions vary but a true lord puts the city first. Later at Roka City, Nobu greeted Yuki and asked his purpose for coming. Yuki declared he came to make Roka a Sagos vassal and asked for objections. Nobu immediately accepted without resistance. He even offered to build a teleportation array linking the cities. So Yuki agreed casually and soon departed. As he flew off, Nobu called for him to slow down, and he's puzzled by such ease. The next day in Seigo City, Yuki woke up, still feeling tired. Vicky noticed and asked why he had not taken a rest. He explained his city tours kept him out until night. Suddenly, someone arrived asking why she was summoned. But Yaya finally discovered Yuki ruled Seigos, which explained the auction. He then questioned why she didn't know, and she admitted she played alone. But he told her she need not be alone, and offered command of the Second Legion. She was momentarily stunned by the offer, but knowing she had no other path, she smiled. Then she finally accepted the offer. Just then, Fiona and Mord returned, and asked what was happening. Yuki took the opportunity to introduce Yaya as their new companion. She then greeted them simply, asking to be called by her name. So, Mord introduced himself in a composed manner, while Fiona welcomed her warmly. After that, Yuki told them he gathered them to plan the attack. He then spread a map explaining 4 nearby lords had agreed to submit. However, Chaka, White, Trotter and Stam refused, so war was declared to begin soon. Mord noted it was 1 against 4, but he trusted their strength. Yet Yuki warned it could turn into 1 against 8. This shocked everyone since he said the 4 had pledged submission. But Vicky noted the haste decision made their intent doubtful. Yuki agreed and warned that those cities might still aid his foes, like betraying him by leaking information. Vicky then offered more guards, but he said leaks didn't matter. He even smiled and noted everything was within plan. He wanted them to see that strategy meant nothing before absolute strength. He also admitted his moves would provoke the whole server, but he stayed confident, believing he had nothing to fear.